Guys, I wanted to tell whoever's might be interested about my thesis project for the New York Film Academy, among a couple other things, just because I'm in one of those awkward moods because I had a freaking one of like 3 classes until 10 p.m. last night, and I didn't sleep at all for some reason. When I have class until 10, I just basically don't sleep or sleep at like 4 in the morning, which kind of sucks. But there is the upside that there have been studies that if you have short-term sleep deprivation, it's actually specifically a deprivation of REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. It eases symptoms of depression. And so you can easily draw a corollary that it probably would have effects on people without depression as well. So sometimes, this actually doesn't happen very often, but sometimes I notice like if I don't get enough sleep, I'll be like more clear-minded or whatever. But this video basically, in a sense, is a way to get out of that. So I just wanted to mention, first of all, that it's interesting that people are so ambitious and wanting to like take on the day and wanting to like take on all these things. But even I'm talking from personal experience, when you talk like in front of a camera, all of a sudden it's like you can easily lose the war, like, and it's almost like you're losing the war like against yourself in a way. Because this happened to me before, you know, and it's like the best way to approach this type of thing is like everybody should be able to like on a moment's notice just be like, NBC cameras outside, like I'm ready to go on TV, right? And that's kind of like my motto or like my MO in a way, because I just figure like, fuck it, I might as well just go all in. You know what I mean? And it's not like I'm getting calls to be on people's news stations or podcasts or whatever, but that's just my philosophy. And I wanted to talk about that as well. But first of all, I just wanted to talk about my thesis project for the New York Film Academy. I'm studying 3D animation, and you may have seen some of my work recently. It's really evolving, but you know, having worked on this program, Autodesk Maya, Photoshop, etc., for several years before I even got to school, my first project, which was a UFO, it was like a UFO swarm that was like camouflaged as space, and then I have the space texture moving on this swarm of UFOs and the camera going and like showing the sheer scale of it, and then it zooms in on like one of the 200 UFOs that are just like copy and pasted primitive shapes, zooms in on one of them, which is going to be like the one that's chosen for the mission or whatever, and that outer camouflage layer opacity decreases and it sort of illuminates like this super cool UFO, and it's like rotating with like really cool instrumental music and stuff. And I have overlaid on it like this map texture of like a continent and like the size of like the Mediterranean Sea basically, and it's supposed to get the viewer kind of thinking about like the scale, because there's nothing really to compare the UFOs to. But like if you look at 1 in 1,000, and it's got like, you know, continental scale just as like a minute part of it. I wish I had some overlays, but I really don't feel like messing with a lot of that stuff right now. That's like what I'm doing for like 15 hours a day in some cases. But yeah, that was my first project, and it was pretty cool. I've done some other ones after that, and I'm actually going to incorporate that into my thesis project. But the thesis, I've been kind of spamming social media with it, and hopefully I'll be getting some attention soon, because I'm putting some super cool lighting and atmospheric density, which is basically like fog kind of, and you can adjust each light for the atmospheric density. So you know, you can adjust like on an atomic level basically. But so the whole story stems from when I got out of the Army in February 24. I moved to Granada Hills, and I was gonna make this whole big resume, which was like 100, turned out to be like 200 megabytes. It was like a Photoshop document, and it had hundreds of layers. And it's like an illustrated resume, because I was looking up like how to make the best resume when I was getting out, and people like, oh, people are doing like dynamic resumes, illustrated resumes, and I was like, oh, I bet I could definitely do that. So You can, oh, actually, I had it perfectly on my website and for some reason it glitched out. But I do have a resume page on skyoptional.com and you can see a bunch of clips from the resume. But I used to have it in order with 0 spaces so you could actually view the whole thing. And then before that, I had it there, but it was a PDF. And the PDF ended up being annoying because it kept prompting you right when you're on mobile and you went to the page, it automatically like popped up and did something like automatically downloaded or something, and I didn't want anything like that for my site because I want, you know, people to feel safe when they're using it basically. But on the top of the resume there's like an airplane and it's carrying a banner that says Jackson Lammy and my email. And so I started, so there's also like a hot air balloon, and there are these 3 creatures in the hot air balloons, and they're called the Philbros. And so, well, I didn't have my Maya license yet. I was waiting for school to start. I started actually building the resume in Blender and teaching myself Blender in the process. And I have a video, basically that's like an airplane that's all like 3D painted and everything. And I have this character who's supposed to resemble Taylor Swift, but due to copyright laws, her name is Sailor Drift, and she's like this alien queen, and she's on her private jet. And like, I have another scene, another clip of Taylor Swift like on her private space plane, and there's like a party going on, and I actually used it for a stop motion project because there are babies in 0 gravity. It's supposed to be like a comedic thing, like there's like an aristocrat sitting with like a woman who's holding a machine gun, and they're like in this like artsy fartsy like high class party that's like on the wing of the plane, and it's all encased in like these really cool stylized like futuristic like alien-esque all like textured in Photoshop, but they're like planes with opacity, so they have windows and everything. And then I have the babies like and some kids like over on the outer wing of the plane, and the babies are actually paper stop motion puppets that were photographed, and I created alpha masks, which basically you can cut out like 2-dimensional images, and I have the babies flying around, and that was like my stop motion. So I basically had, they wanted us to do a traditional stop motion project, and I was able to finagle it into like a digital scene. But I have Taylor Swift sitting on her throne, and there are like reporters all around her like floating around with cameras and stuff, and there's an astronaut with a camera floating around outside the spaceship. And I did the one AI image. I had to put the astronaut in AI because, you know, a lot of the teachers will be like no AI and everything, but I think like when you spend like 300 hours on something and you just have like 1 out of like 1,000 assets in the project, it's like a perfect like astronaut, perfectly realistic with a news camera, and he's videotaping. There's like an eagle that's in space, and it's like pounding on the glass to the UFO because it's trying to steal the babies, and it's supposed to be like a joke. And then at the end, the eagle like pops off one of the windows and it smashes on the ground, and he flies off with one of the babies. But like, I'm intentionally keeping Taylor Swift kind of rarefied in a way, so she only has like a couple frames in all the projects, and she's sitting on her space plane. But like, the plan was to have her like have a private jet on her private jet, and then she flies it to another private jet, and then flies like down to Earth basically. And then these Philbros that are in the hot air balloon are like thieves basically, and one of them is like hiding out in the mountains, like where my 3D resume is, because it's my 3D resume is like 2,000 feet tall, and it's like between these 2 like pillar like mountains that are all like 3D texture and Blender and everything. And I have Philbro sitting there, and he goes, "Well, blow me down," which is like a pirate slang basically, because you know they're thieves. So he jumps off the mountain, and he jumps onto her plane as she's driving by. And then so when she goes back up to her UFO, he's somehow there, and I haven't figured out how. I think he's going to be in the hot air balloon in space and approaching this UFO. And so the UFO, so Taylor Swift has a stoned AI chatbot who basically pilots her plane. And like when she's on Earth, she's volunteering for a children's hospital, but she keeps no call, no showing. And because her stoned AI chatbot keeps like messing up the schedule. And so she's like ushering it to go faster, but it's like flashing on the screen that there's a scheduling conflict. So they somehow find their way up to space, and you know, the bright lights of the UFO are like enthralling to them, and you can see it in their eyes and everything. And then they go through this thing called like Dreamwave, which is so the Taylor Swift's UFO, which is just one out of 1,000 UFOs, what has been dispatched to Earth because the UFOs detected the atomic bomb blasts back in the 1940s. And so they traveled like several light years to get to Earth, and it took all this time, right? So that's kind of like the backstory. But so the space plane detects the Philbros and sends them into like a dream wave, which kind of like takes over their psyches in a way, or like makes them go into like this dream world where they're walking along like these really cool walkways that have all been created and textured. And then they go into this tunnel. And so the Dreamwave is able to tell that what they want is riches. And they want gold and they want fine art and stuff. So they bring the Philbros to the Mint. Now the Mint is going to be modeled off a painting of mine from 2011 that's based off of Lucius Cornelius Sulla, who was a dictator in the Roman Republic. He actually has a fascinating story. It's intertwined with Julius Caesar. It's intertwined with a famous general you may have heard of named Marius. And it's a really great statue. The nose is chopped off, and in the painting I have like a mountain in place of the nose, and it's composited with a couple landscapes, and it's like this architectural sort of framing to it, and there's a lot of gold. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have it be the Mint, and I'm gonna have my thesis is primarily gonna be like a lot of shots of this one place, which aren't gonna be like the shots. I've done some really cool dynamic like visual effects, motion graphics type work for it, but I'm kind of engineering it so that like the work in progress and like the time-lapse footage and like the footage of me placing the different planes and the way that the texture interacts mathematically with the mechanics is sort of part of the spectacle in the first place. And that's for a couple reasons, because if it's interesting, and it's interesting for me, so it passes the test. You know, it hasn't passed the social media like views and likes or whatever test, but honestly, I'm not worried about that at all. But another reason is because if you screenshot your works in progress, or you give people an understanding of how you built it and whatever, then they know it's not AI. You know, so it works. It's a win-win situation. But so I'm gonna have the Philbros within this scene, and the scene is gonna be very, very dense. I have like 60 characters planned out. I could show you actually, because I have it right on screen here. You've probably seen it a million times, but so let me just zoom out so I can show you the way it's labeled. So I can't see what you see here, but you see all those labels there? I already have a lot of those figures. Like, look at the Spartan character right there. I have him in ZBrush. Actually, I brought him from ZBrush into Substance Painter and then back into Maya, and he's like ready to go. Like, I have textures right now. I have a lot of these architectural creations that have actually been painted with opacity masks, and I use like a double-sided shader that I actually just learned in my look dev class 2 days ago with a really talented professor named Frederick Durand. And so I have like a lot of the architecture is, parts of it are see-through, and then inside of the architecture is a color, and then there'll be a light inside of it. And so it first of all looks very cool, but it also makes it so that any light that's coming through the architecture will be scattered. So imagine like the shadow of a tree, like the light shining through the tree and it's moving against a wall. It adds a lot of dynamism to the scene. So what I have conceptually, and I'm taking a screenwriting storyboarding class as well as a thesis class, which I think that's a lot of thesis planning for 3D animators who are going to make like a 3-minute film basically. But that's for me. I haven't really gotten like animated characters moving around. Like, granted, I could do that, but it's almost like the last step in the process for me in a way. And I just haven't really got into keyframing. In fact, it's kind of ironic, at this animation school, the one thing that I really haven't been doing is like keyframing actual characters. We took our animation class, one of the first classes. I hadn't had my rig set up. I hadn't had my characters fully developed. And I could have done a lot of animation work, but I'm like, well, if I'm going to have something on my portfolio, I want to rig it, I want to texture it, I want to animate it, like the whole 9 yards. I want to be for me. So a lot of people on their portfolios, they'll have like, you know, rigs created by someone else, which is standard practice to use rigs created by someone else. And in the industry, usually it's so specialized that there's what they call a pipeline. So there'll be textures, there'll be animators, there'll be storyboarders, you know, but I'm really a generalist because I kind of just rely on myself for it. But these rigs that we make in Maya are really complicated because there are several different systems that people will generally incorporate into one rig. And what a rig is it's like bones that go into a modeled character that will deform the mesh. So the character is made out of vertexes and faces. And so the bones will be skinned to the mesh. So each bone will affect a certain vertex a certain amount of times. And there are things you can do like called preferred angle, where like if you set up two bones, they don't really know which way to move. But like if you look at my arm, how it's already kind of bent, you can set that as a preferred angle so your skeleton will sort of act properly. But there are what's called forward kinematics and reverse kinematics. FK and IK, inverse kinematics. It's basically like you could have a controller on your hand, and so when you just move your hand controller, it moves everything, right? And that's inverse kinematics. But forward kinematics is like really straightforward. In fact, our animation teacher generally preferred it, which is where you move the shoulder and it just moves the arm like this. You move the elbow and it just... Anyways, you have several systems. So you have actually 3 different skeletons layered on top of each other. And then you have controls in the systems, and you have the systems parented to each other, and you have them connected to switches, which change the parenting nature of the base skeleton to the different kinematic skeletons that you have. And then you'll also connect these controls to visibility sliders, not sliders, but just controls, where if you switch to IK, all your FK stuff will disappear. And that kind of makes it difficult for troubleshooting. I've taken several courses online about, you know, some of these more advanced skeletal rigs, but I kind of just settled on, like, the rig just keeps breaking. Like, so I have like a lot of my joints will just be FK, and it's kind of funny when you get down to it, like when you talk about like taking shortcuts and stuff, because a lot of these like 60 or 70 characters that I'm making for my scene, I want them to be rigged as well. But there are all these controllers and all these this and that's that you have to do. And I realized you can literally, like, if you want an animated skeleton, an animated statue in your scene, you can just put a couple bones in there and push skin. And then what you have to do is paint skin weights, because it never weights it perfectly. And there are all these different complexities that go into just like binding the skin, painting the skin weights. But literally, if you get the pipeline down, you can get it, like, just throw a bone in there and then skin it, paint it, and then you can have literally a rigged character in a matter of minutes, which is pretty cool. So what I kind of plan on doing is just having the fill bros like in the scene. And as you saw from the picture I showed you, there's that architecture that goes around. So the camera's going to be like going around the architecture kind of, and the characters are going to be going through. And it kind of matches my style perfectly because I have a very theatric and spectacular style. And a lot of my inspiration comes from artists like Michelangelo. And if you look at like the Battle of Cascina by Michelangelo, the Battle of Anghiari by Leonardo da Vinci, which are actually two frescoes, unfinished frescoes that these artists painted right across from one another, and in a new building in I think the Republic of Florence. And they're very like busy. It's like action packed. You know, it's like when you're watching Transformers and you watch all the transformations taking place. Like the spectacle is so amazing, and that's kind of what I'm going for. But I have a couple other ideas. You know, I've noticed, like I mentioned, a lot of times you start planning for this stuff, and like planning for this whole Phil Bros Taylor Swift thing, like in Blender, having never used Blender before. It took me so long and so many headaches just to get this lady like flying in a plane, and I have the camera like going into the plane, and it shows her, and it shows the dashboard and the graphics and the blinking with the robotic voice saying there's a scheduling conflict. And then I have Philbro rigged with an in-house Blender rig that was pre-made. And granted, hadn't used the software before, but a lot of these plans end up just sort of like falling into the basics, you know? And that's another reason that this motion graphics approach that I'm doing with the work in progress clips is so good, because it gives you so much publishable material for, you know, a lot of times when you look at like people's thesis, it's so like incredible. And a lot of theses that we watch will be like the whole class will get together and make one video, and it'll be so perfect. And that's not really what I'm going for. Like it's not really what I believe in. Like I think that a lot of that critical eye that directors and producers cast upon stuff like waste so much time. Like they show us like all these particularities of like you have these characters on a boat and the boat's on the water, right? And the directors will say, oh no, we need this, we need that. And then when you look at the after shot, it like looks kind of different, but then when you boil it down, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. So that's kind of what I like anyways. Like if you look a lot of these unfinished works, like the Adoration of the Magi by Leonardo da Vinci, there are two unfinished paintings, or in a painting and a drawing that I think were recreated by other artists as copies, but they're very unfinished, and I personally think it looks better that way. Like I don't need everything to be perfect, so I'm gonna have these Philbros like going around, but then I'm also gonna have these motion graphics elements, because the character in the center, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, in the center right there, he's gonna be like the guardian, basically. And as you see, I have these owls, right? And these owls are from a video that came out right around when I was finishing this painting, and it's called Transformation Owl. And it shows this one owl. It's kind of cruel in a way, but it shows this one owl standing on a perch on somebody's arm. And they bring in these other owls and they show it to the owl, and you know, they have those defense mechanisms where they get all skinny and like evil looking. Well, this owl is like the largest owl in Africa, and it's so handsome. This particular one was just a very handsome owl, and they bring it in, and the other owl just turns into like a raisin and like this evil, like wretched creature. But I love the way that like the spirit that he has, and so I'm working it in to this thesis and to the whole story. And I'm gonna have these owls like colorful feathers. You know, like if you look at crows through infrared, their crows aren't actually black and ravens aren't black. They actually have these ultraviolet colors. So I'm gonna have it be like very colorful and like this sort of UV like radiation atmosphere, and they're gonna be animated with real feathers, right? These are my plans. And they're like, what they do is basically like those pigeons that you see in New York City that will like fly around and pick up shiny stuff and like collect it. So that's like how they build the mint, basically, is they like fly across the universe and like pick up gold hoards and stuff. I'm planning to have it kind of comical in that the Phil Bros finally get what they want because they get like this treasure trove, but like there's just so much gold and the gold is so heavy that they can't like take it. So they're going to be, and some of the creatures are going to be animated interacting with them. And this like guardian or like, yeah, this custodian of the mint is like in this like a virtual world kind of in the center, and he's like locked in place, but it's almost like a portal. It's like a 4-dimensional type object, and he can switch out. Like I have a goddess as well that works really well. I did some work for the Sony Virtual Production Studio with some extracurricular program from NIFA. And in Unreal, I basically just took a lot of my models and paintings from Unreal and just planted them. So like one of the main overarching themes and the reason I got into 3D animation is because of this world that's named after the Leonardo da Vinci painting called The Adoration of the Magi. And so it's a painting that I showed at the Pacific Design Center, and I have it, I could show you, I might as well show you. So this painting I actually recreated in 3D, and it's 4 different boards. In fact, it's probably so dark that, yeah, actually you can see it. See, I love this lighting too. See, it doesn't look perfectly lit like how you would have in a magazine or something, but like you can photograph paintings in different light, and it's amazing like just the novelty that you get from like sort of a darker appearance or something that doesn't look so perfect. But yeah, this is 4 different paintings, and I actually have recreated it in Autodesk Maya. And I'm going through and doing, this is a print. I sold a bunch of prints down at Venice Beach and Santa Monica Pier. So I'm recreating that. I'm gonna have that worked into the story, but I'm kind of like cutting my teeth on these other projects just because I want to really have a degree of expertise when I get into the adoration. And what I'm planning, and this is sort of the start of this is an idea that I'm kind of getting into with Sella, but it's a wonderful idea that I had where it's basically a projection of the painting directly into the scene. And so I'm building the scene perfectly around the painting, right? So that was my plan, and how it's actually turning out is I'm going to be modeling the painting around the 3D stuff because I want it to be like pixel perfect, right? So I have 2 planes of this painting that I showed you in Photoshop, and they're in my scene, right? So there are 2 3D planes, and then I have the actual geometry that I'm working on. Now, both the planes are locked to the camera, right, with a distance node. So this distance node is connected to an attribute that changes the size of the plane with its distance from the camera that corresponds perfectly to the actual geometry. So for example, if you look at the plane through the camera and you change the distance of the plane, it remains exactly perfect to the camera. Now, what this does is it allows me to have one plane with transparency or lower opacity, and you look through it and you see basically the projected image of the painting onto the geometry, right? And then so I wrote with Python, or ChatGPT wrote some code to basically, so I have buttons to change the opacity so that when I'm working, I can make sure that each asset that I'm working on fits perfectly into the actual scene. Now, this also has other possibilities, because what you could do then is you can add what are called alpha textures. Basically, you can have like effects that are on the plane. So you could have like 1,000 different planes with 1,000 different effects, and you can have them visible or invisible, or you can change their position relative to whatever shot you're making. You could also change like the refraction. You may have seen I just did a refraction study where it's like incredible in Maya how you can just take like a transparent material and basically adjust the attributes of this material to resemble a refractive glass. And you can change the index of refraction to be as high as you want. So you could have it be like 20 times the refractive index of diamonds, which are some of the highest refractive materials. Silicone is actually way higher than even diamonds. It's in the threes. I think diamond is like a 2.5. But in class, our professor was bringing it all the way up to 10. And Maya kind of struggles with it because it's not really a realistic thing. But it's incredible. Like if you look at a wine glass and you see like all the way that the light interacts with the wine in the wine glass, it's fascinating to consider the way that this light refracts. You also consider dichroic glass, which I'm surprised hasn't been incorporated just for the visual aesthetics alone. Because dichroic glass splits light in a crystalline structure and into its constituent spectral rays, which is cool, right? You think about it, it's almost like a time machine, because like time is basically dependent on light as per Einstein's theory of relativity. So like when you look at clocks in space, like they act differently. Like a lot of it, like it's correlated with light and like energy flow, and like energy is correlated with gravity, and like all this stuff is super interesting to me. So what you can do with all these planes is so in a wine glass, if you look at a wine glass that's has the same thickness all the way around, you won't get as many cool effects. But it's the changing thickness of the wine glass that changes the refractive attributes of the light and gives it that dynamic effect. So what I did in my study is I just took a couple simple objects. I gave them like different thicknesses. I gave them some curvature, and I just have one image in the scene. And when you look through the camera, you just see like this spectacle of incredible lights. And it plays perfectly into what I'm getting at with like this fantastical, four-dimensional, like otherworldly realm. And so you can put these effects on these planes, right? Like, and you can have them animated and so forth. And another thing I found is that when you change the distance relative to the camera of the planes and they pass through lights, like virtual lights that you have in the scene, it totally changes the way that the lights interact with the scene. So it's like you're getting a bunch of different scenes, just one after another. And I personally like that. Like it keeps my attention, and I think that I'm onto something. Like if I really follow through with it, it's going to be something cool. So I don't have quite a year to finish this. It's going to be basically, after the spring semester, I'm going to graduate. So, but this is going to be the longest project that I've ever worked on besides just the modeling project of this building that I showed you, the Adoration of the Magi, which is like several million polygons, which is super cool. So that's going to be my thesis, and hopefully you guys find that interesting. Another thing that I found interesting, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts with this guy Clavicular, who's this 20-year-old looks maxer who he's popular for a lot of different reasons. He's kind of infamous, and it's really fascinating to me because I have this whole philosophy about like sociology, and I love like theorizing about human action and like thinking through the lens of an activist, like how to make society better, how to make things more efficient, like in these mechanical processes, like in the way that you teach kids to like basically behave as more like civilized adults. Basically, like I'm not talking about like a nunnery, I'm just talking about interesting stuff, like stuff that's just, even if it's stuff that's been thought of before, like it's not as interesting to me because I like these novel ideas, and it's kind of like about the theatrics and stuff. But I'm fascinated about that, and a lot of these new guys coming up, like with their eccentricities, they talk about normies. So I mean, I don't cast aspersions or anything like that. And this guy Clavicular, he talks about subhumans. And I don't know, I probably at 40 years old, I might even be a subhuman or whatever. I tried to check my eye ratio or whatever, my face ratio, but the app I was using, I must have been so ugly that it basically didn't even think I was human. So it wanted to basically for me to just keep taking more pictures. I'm like, I'm facing the camera. I don't know what you want me to do. But so Clavicular, he started out when he was 14 years old on regimens of growth hormones and steroids to try to optimize his personal development. I don't know how tall his dad is, but he achieved a height of 6'2". And even though I don't quite agree with some of the ways that he characterizes people, he even said himself that he's like kind of a very different guy. Like he didn't fit in very well, like before he got all this status and everything, but he looks at things in like this very rational way, and he tries to optimize his looks to get more girls, you know. And it's one of those things that it almost like it spurs like a certain amount of jealousy, you know. And like me personally, like I have like a whole philosophy about jealousy, and so I tend to like treat these types of situations as like special cases, and they're fascinating to me, especially when you consider that this guy's only 20 years old. Like a lot of people would still call him a child. Like he even said like his parents like took his phone away, right? And he's been in the news recently, like he's making mistakes that a young man would make, right? He's getting drunk while he's live streaming. He shot a dead alligator. You may have seen that in the news, but he is almost like a doctor. And like, I never would have thought, and like, I'm not a fanboy, don't get me wrong, but his level of intelligence when he talks is fascinating. And he's actually said that he doesn't talk well to girls. He says that he just asks them if they want to hook up, basically. And you can sort of, so he says it like gesture max. What he says is like, if you're like this guy that sort of jokes around, makes everything like it's a big joke, basically, is like this gesture max. And he was asked if he has narcissistic personality disorder or whether he's sociopathic or something. And he said that he's neurodivergent. I personally think he could have got away with just saying that he's not like a normie or whatever, which may be an aspersion, but I personally find it interesting because I'm always trying to buck the trends, you know, like I'm always trying to like do something new, come up with something new that hasn't been done before, because I just don't understand how you can go on like Twitter or Facebook and just say like the same old shit. Like, I love seeing pictures of my friends, like, oh, I'm enjoying life, like, oh, I hope all my friends are doing well. Like, I'm not saying that, like, I'm not trying to put you down, you know, for what you do on Facebook or whatever, but I'm like, I can't go on there and just say, like, this normal thing, you know, and it might have to do with the fact that I'm basically a failed artist. Like, the art that I put out never really does that good, so I'm like, it's gotta be the best, right? Because if I think it's the best, then it's gotta be something new, it's gotta be something explosive, you know what I mean? But he like has this really chilled out, a really calm, like scientifically engineered like cadence and tone and word choice, and the way that he handles stress, like just sitting there in front of the camera. Imagine that. Like a lot of the interviewers are like making fun of him. I'm trying to think of a few, but the guy that interviewed him for 60 minutes was someone in the comments got a lot of likes. They're like, he's smirk maxing, because the guy was like almost like laughing at him, like making fun of him and stuff. And I thought it was like really cringe, even though like you got to have this mental fortitude to literally go out there and say that some like, oh, they look like, I think he called JD Vance subhuman or something. So JD Vance is subhuman. I must be even worse. And I had hair transplants. Like I used to get my eyebrows plucked or threaded. I still do on occasion, but I kind of look at it the same way, in a way, like it's this rationalism. It's like the better you look, the better you should do, right? But like it doesn't always correlate so perfectly, because a lot of times like you get like a dime, you know, you finally achieve like you're a dime piece or whatever, and then people are like hating on you and stuff. But like even at 20 years old, this guy knows everything. He is so careful about what he does. He smashes bones because they grow back better. He does a lot of different protocols. He was taking drugs for a while, but he was like a controlled drug addict. Basically, he took Adderall. I think he even took like methamphetamines or something like that. His steroid use, but he's not using steroids to get like totally jacked. He uses GLP blockers to stay cut. But it's almost like if you have this level of like self oversight and discipline, it's almost like the rules weren't actually made for him. Like if they were testing all these like crazy drugs on people, and everybody that they were testing on him had the same reserved way that they treat it in like scientific implementations of these protocols, like there wouldn't really have to be rules in the first place, right? And that's not to say that he couldn't have made a mistake, but he's also very coherent when he talks about he's not going out there and telling 15-year-olds to use HGH. Like he's saying, consult your doctor, and he knows all like the different ins and outs. Like if you do it wrong, you can get pre-diabetic, basically insulin resistance. And I'm like, am I listening to a doctor right now? But he's fighting too. It's so political, and he doesn't talk about politics at all. He says like, I'm not into politics, but he kind of does like creep towards the right. And apparently they caught him on a clip like singing along to a song that like mentioned Hitler, and he was like in this van with Andrew Tate. And in the clip where he's drunk and overdoses or whatever, he basically, I think he just like passes out drunk, but like he's like roaming the streets with a couple guys, you know, and he's not like this naturally this ladies man. And he says that. He says like he's not, like he doesn't know exactly how to talk to women. But then again, when you're like a dime piece basically, or like if you're like this really like tall, like giant guy, a lot of times they'll like manifest these certain attributes to like even themselves out kind of. But I noticed that like this explosive charisma where you like walk into a room and command the room, like maybe he could use some work on that. And so like that's the one like edge that I kind of like determined that I had over him in a way, because like I'm always making jokes and stuff, but like if you look at it like gesture maxing and like that's a mog or whatever, then I think maybe you don't get like the full power that humor can bring, because it can disarm an entire room. And you can have like your worst enemies will be like, yeah, we're just like following protocol here. Like we oppose you, but like if you really get into them with like this humor and this charisma or like this emotional connectivity, then you can draw anybody. You know what I mean? But I just want to mention that because I'm like, it's like being cold, right? It's like you see people walking around outside being freezing in like a t-shirt when it's freezing cold outside, and you're like, what rational reason do you have to do that? Like there must be some gain, like they feel tough or they're trying to toughen themselves in a way. But the way I always look at it is like, if my hands are cold, I want to put on gloves. Like my hands actually get cold in this room when I wake up at like 4 a.m, and sometimes I put these on because I don't put my heater on a lot of times, you know? It's like California in the morning, like even in the summer times, it can be pretty chilly. You know, I'm like, and it was the same thing in the Army. Like in the Army, they always want you to have like a t-shirt and shorts on. Like that's the whole thing. It's like you get paid to work out for an hour and a half, which is awesome, you know? But you get to formation 15 minutes early, 6:15, flag goes off at 6:30. So you're just standing there in the freezing cold. It's like 40 degrees, shorts and a t-shirt they want you to do. And it's like all that value that you could have had. But I mean, at the same time, it depends on whether the body actually acclimates to the cold. You know, there are beneficial effects of the cold, don't get me wrong, but the scientific research that I've read is that your body doesn't actually acclimatize unless you're like straight in like freezing cold for like 18 hours a day, which isn't obviously what they do. So I'm like, if you have a bad haircut and you could easily have a better haircut, you know, or like there are things about your appearance, like if you could have like a lower BMI, then why wouldn't you do that? You know, that's what I'm like. I talk a lot. Like I'll go for 6-mile runs. Like I have basically a 6-pack, you know, but sometimes like I look in the mirror, I'll be like, my 6-pack's going away, so I'll just like hunker down basically, and that's looks maxing, you know. And a lot of the people who come out like hating this guy are looks maxers themselves. Like he's getting compared to people who have like facial filler, like compared to people who have hair transplants, you know. And it's just kind of funny to me. But it's like, and I mentioned this before, like, and this is actually another thing I have written down. I'm gonna try to end off with this, is like, I am embattled, right? Like I'm a battler. I'm an embattled guy. Like I want to go into a room and just battle people, you know, oratorically, you know, rhetorically, use rhetoric, talk about my ideas, try to paint a verbal picture, try to gain some power or some renown or some status just by being the best person I can be and facing down the trouble. Like if it hurts me, then I want to hit it even harder, right? And so I look at a lot of people and I tell people this, and I write about it, is like, if you're at art school, you have to do art. You know, like if you're at animation school, you have to do animation. Like that's what you're doing. Like you're not at video game playing school. You're not at like internet, like Facebook scrolling school. You know, I could probably learn some of these lessons better myself, to be honest. But I'm like, I'm not afraid to go out there and say like, isn't it kind of bullshit, like when you look at like the sheer price of healthcare, and it's like, look at simple economics. Like the more healthcare you have, the cheaper the price is. So if the demand is so high, why isn't the supply higher? Why don't they just make new doctors? You know, it's like, you got to go to school for like 8 years. You got to have residency for all these years. And it's all like this hierarchical system. And they develop these attitudes where they're like bitchy about everything. And they have all this status, like because they're doctors and they're like super special. And it's like, we have AI now. We have the internet now. We have like medical dictionaries that you can search through in a matter of seconds. Like you just have to understand that like we could have more doctors, you know. And it's like, I talk about it. Bill Gates actually just posted this yesterday, that he's coming out because he spends billions of dollars to help people in Africa and help babies and help women, you know, and basically lower the infant mortality rate. And you have people from Nigeria doesn't need your charity. Or you have people, oh, he's in the Epstein files, why isn't he arrested, and all this stuff. And it's like, what do you even know about anything? He literally just came out yesterday propounding a new technology that's super cheap. And I mentioned this in my essay. I said, you don't need a time machine quantum computer in each hospital room. It's called a freaking heart rate monitor. You buy it for $1 at your local corner store. You should try it sometime. You know what I mean? But he just came out. He said, look, this new thing, it's 10 times cheaper than the other heart rate monitors. He's standing around all these equipment. He says it costs $100,000 for some of those machines. It's literally a freaking heart rate monitor. You can do it with 2 fingers for free and check your heart rate. And you can attach these things to babies and it will monitor their arrhythmia, it'll monitor their heart rates, it'll monitor blood, whatever it is, you know? And it's like, why can't, and I'm embattled, like I'm fighting. Why can't you do it better? You know, you could picture me as like one of these characters. I have a character named Porkadoodle. It's a porcupine combined with a labradoodle, and it shoots out its quills like a rocket ship all the time. Not all the time, just sometimes. It used to be when you got too close to him, but I mean, you know, he likes to cuddle too. So, but also look at things like schooling, right? There are so many inefficiencies. And like, I'm not trying to put anyone down because I have a lot of great teachers, but like I'm going to school for 3D animation. When you have an interview at a 3D animation company, they want to know, they want to get down to brass tacks and the meat and potatoes. They don't want to know if you wrote a freaking script. You know, they don't want to know if you know about critical thinking. They don't want to know if you know about Black History or Gay Pride Month. Like, they want to know the freaking software. And it's like, I'm in my last year now at this animation school. I'm taking one class in rigging with pre-made Maya rigs and one class in look dev by this teacher that I already named Frederick Durand. You can find him on the internet. And these are the technical classes that I'm taking, right? But I'm doing this stuff all the time. I'm developing a pipeline. Substance, okay. I have my assets, I'm building them out, blocking them out in Maya. I'm taking it to ZBrush, giving them 10,000 to 150,000 polygons and sculpting them. Then I'm bringing them into Substance Painter and painting them, getting the UVs, right? It's outputting several maps. I'm bringing it back into Maya. I'm applying the maps to the object. I'm lighting the object. I'm putting in the scene. I'm doing the whole freaking kit and caboodle, okay? And every time I have a class with this guy, Frederick Durand, I learn something that I can then go back and take to my thesis. All this other stuff is nothing. All this other stuff that they do with all these to get their regional accreditations and everything is bullshit, okay? And I'm not going to sit here and disrespect you. I understand that you didn't build the system. The system built you. But we need to stop with all this complacency bullshit. And so this is what I'm into, and this is what I talk about. And I love JD Vance, and I love Marco Rubio. I hope these guys run. You know, I want to see these characters in the action movie. You know what I mean? But I'm like, it's a totally different world when you're the guy, like everybody always puts me in this place because I'm this talkative guy. I have all these ideas, and like, it's almost like I'm imposing on you, you know? And it's like, if you make a joke is a power move. You know, and I'm not going and saying, give me all the power, but I'm making jokes. Like people say, like, I read the room, right? And my dad has the same characteristic. Like, he almost seems like a president. My dad is like a very professional guy. My mom is a very intelligent woman as well, right? But like, you're living a whole different life if everybody looks at you like you're supposed to be this guy who they're like, oh, if he makes a mistake, then like I can get one over on him, and like, cause everybody wants to beat the fastest racer, and you can run faster than me. You know what I mean? Like, you can run faster than me, you can have a better idea than me, you can pick stuff up quicker than me, you know, but like, it's just the case, something that you have to deal with is that if you are this person who like is perceived to be like have this like weight kind of, or like this gravity to you, then like I encounter so much pushback. Like I encounter so much like evening, like everybody wants to like even the playing field, you know, which is really not fair in a lot of cases, because a lot of times people don't understand that like I'm not this like triumphant guy, you know what I mean? Like I don't have a string of successes or like a trophy room. You know what I mean? But I understand that like JD Vance, like a lot of these politicians, like they come out with these hardline things, but a lot of these opinions that they have are based on their constituency, because their job is to represent their constituency. And like there's so many trolls online. It's like these people come out with like these unthinking things, like, oh, like Bill Gates, Epstein, like it's like they're painting all these like monsters, you know? So like if you're a rational politician, and this is my personal opinion, if you don't like it, you know where you can go, you know what I mean? But like these politicians are rational people. So like when they look at the trolls and like these hordes of people, like Taylor Swift walks into like the Super Bowl or whatever, everybody's booing and everything, which I think is horribly inappropriate. But Donald Trump is a true politician, because it's like this wave of hate, and he's like just riding on the wave, you know? But like these guys, like you can't, like their actual thinking is more intelligent. You know, like they're actual, like they do consider like the whole spectrum of reality. So like if you think that people can't be like influenced one way or the other, or you think that people won't be receptive to an idea just because they're a politician that represents a constituency that doesn't believe that particular idea, you're mistaken. Because at the end of the day, it is all politics, and politics is like human connection almost above all else, you know? And it's kind of fascinating with Clavicular when he's in this interview with these guys, and they ask him to. They say, "Will you rate me?" And he rates him. This guy, he's on their podcast, and they're throwing around all this politics and stuff because, like, at the beginning of the podcast, he came out and he's like, "Oh, I don't have a problem with you guys. Like, you seem cool. You know, I watch your stuff." And then, boom, he triggered the podcaster to do this opening segment where he's like, "This amazing guy, Clavicular, has entered the podcast," and it's like all politics, like this give and take. and then he asks, "Give me an honest rating of how attractive I am." Clavicular looks at him dead in the eye and says 3.5. And it was like, what? Because it's like this going against the political basically atmosphere, like the political universe, you know, which in one sense is kind of like a fumble, but in another sense, from my own like objective way that I look at it, is like he has his own game, you know, like that's this like embattled nature that I'm talking about, is that like a doctor, like hospitals and everybody, they would be against because like if you upset the status quo, then people would be like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, but it kind of goes against my own reasoning, because I'm saying like, well, this rational to make yourself look better is rational to be warmer. Why wouldn't you just be warmer? But maybe some of these people that don't wear the coats in the winter is because they want to embattle, you know, they want to like flex, and like these types of flexes, like I feel like a lot of these guys, like he says that he looked better when he was 18 and he's only 20 years old. And I highly doubt that. Like from my eye, like females look like their faces look good, like in sort of the way that he's gauging his own looks. But I personally think he'll probably look better when he's like 30, like for my own taste. But you have to understand that these young guys, like their whole life is about women, you know, and it's almost like, I remember when I was that age, like in a sense, like I had almost an idealization of women, you know, and so like sometimes I think that maybe they like these guys will absorb some of the way that women think, like into their own like strategies or whatever. And like he says women these days, like it's the toughest dating market. Like women are sharks. And he talks about all these like really sensitive topics that would make a lot of people jealous, and probably me as well, like if I was shorter or whatever. But he's saying that they're basically ruthless, and like the way that he talks is almost like he's perfectly personifying like the bitchiness of like a really hot girl you can imagine, like this carnal, like primal sort of nature where she just has so much power. Like she is a goddess on earth throughout the entire day, and everybody is just bowing and catering to her, right? And she can develop like this, it's almost like an attractive bitchiness, you know, where it's like this rudeness that like has like this like edge to it. And I feel like he's like adopting that sort of, but it's like such a scientist, you gotta listen to him. It reminds me of me. I used to take Adderall when I was a kid, and like a couple different points since then for brief periods of time. And it gives you like this level of focus that he says that he doesn't have this charisma and everything. But then again, if you're taking Adderall, like it's gonna hurt your charisma. But he's got, it almost like takes away like your humor. Like you're not like bouncing up and down and joking around when you're on methamphetamine, basically, which is what Adderall is, you know. But apparently he stopped taking the drug since I don't know why they always say overdose, but he's probably, you know, this guy was taking some drug, basically, like, and not in a controlled way. And obviously if you're out at the club, you know, like you're not being followed around by fans, like you're just with like three guys alone with like a guy on the camera, and you're sitting there on a bench and you've had way too much to drink, and all the guys with you are just like, there's anxiety when you go out to the club. Like that's why people need alcohol in the first place. You know, I think, but people are so judgmental. Like I think that people should be able to dance and flail around and have a good time without being so, but the nervousness a lot of times is what causes people to be judgmental, because if you're flailing around like a crazy man, it's going to make the next guy nervous. You know what I mean? So, and this is a big part of my philosophy too, is that I think that like I've been to the club before, and like I'm a natural guy. I'm a happy guy, you know. I'm confident and whatever, and like I don't know how to dance, and I'm be dancing around, and people be like, "What is this clown doing?" You know what I mean? But that's like the opposite. Like people, like I feel like even in the grocery store, like it's almost like you stand in there, like almost like trying not to start shaking. You know what I mean? But like my own person, I love this type of stuff, and like I'll just leave off because I was thinking about this when he was talking about like the shortness and like the tallness and this stuff. Is that what if you had like tax incentives to sort of like, what if you understood the way that the genomes interacted? So like you could label people like I'm an A, like it's almost like a blood type, like I'm an A, you're B, like, and there are these combinations that will produce like a median height. You know what I mean? You'd be like the A marries the B, then you get like a 5% tax break or something like that. So you like in some way incentivize it so that there's like an evening out. Because I personally, it doesn't necessarily feel good to like just tower over people, you know, especially being this like I'm a combatant, you know, like people are coming after me. Once they have like these things that they can come like that will make them like have some, you know what I mean? Like you wouldn't necessarily, if you're a guy and you're like 5'2", like you're not gonna necessarily want to go out to the club with a guy who's like 6'4", you know what I mean? Because it's just gonna be like a natural, and it's like a sensitive thing, you know what I mean? And so I just feel like in a lot of these cases, like even a lot of like the racial sensitivities maybe could be like the mixing pot, like if you could mix it more, sort of like it might be better, you know. But obviously distinct cultural elements do add like a type of flair to society. So let me just leave off with that. So that's about it. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed. I was gonna take 2 takes, but I kind of got on a roll there. If you watched it, give me a thumbs up and send me a smiley face, and also share. And if you want an autograph, just say the word, and I'll be sure to send it right over. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.